So as we were discussing, in early 2000, right, at the beginning of this millennium, US interest rates were so low. Banks, in fact, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates all the way down to almost 0%. So banks were getting minimal return on investments. Right? The return on equity was very poor. So they were not happy with these returns. They wanted to increase the returns, enhance returns somehow, and give a higher return to their shareholders. So what did they do? They became more inventive, more aggressive. They started lending aggressively. They went into a practice which is called predatory lending. Now, predatory lending is a lending where you give a loan to a customer who doesn't actually need the loan. And you create a need. Now, that's what banking is all about, right? You need to take deposits and lend it out now. But when you lend it out, there is a fiduciary responsibility that you should make sure your customer is capable of repaying the loan. Now, if you're intentionally putting the guy in trouble, if you're pushing him into debt, into a debt trap where he is unable to pay at some point, then you're in deep trouble. Then the customer is in deep trouble, right? If he is unable to repay his debt, maybe his property is mortgaged to a bank, he might have so many other issues to face. So that's what happened in the US. Banks were so aggressive. If a person had no assets, no disposable income, no earnings, no repayment capacity, still banks are willing to go and offer loans. Why? Because they wanted to enhance their returns, right? So now this customer segment was risky. Not prime customers, they were subprime customers. So that's what caused, that was the root cause of the subprime mortgage crisis. Aggressive lending by banks backed by low interest rates in the US. Right? So this one gradually escalated. Now people started taking loans and they invested in property, right? So the property market in the US started booming. Everyone was investing in property. You take a loan today and the first thing you do is go and invest in property, right? So the market was doing well. Property prices started going up and everyone was very happy. Right now the bank had mortgaged the property, so they were also happy because the value of the collateral is going up. So this continued to happen. More and more people started buying property. You buy property today, tomorrow the price has gone up. Right? So it's a good investment, fantastic investment. It's also called leverage. Right? Leverage is, remember leverage buyouts, what we did 2 weeks back? That's where you borrow and invest. So this was something similar. You borrow from banks and invest in property, and the value of the property goes up, right? So that enhances your return. Now, when that happens, gradually, when that was happening, gradually, interest rates in the US started picking up because everyone was spending like crazy, like there is no tomorrow, and inflation and then interest rates in the US started going up. When that started happening, the Federal Reserve, right? Federal Reserve also monitors what is going on in the economy, and when interest rates hit a certain level, right? Their threshold level is about 2%. When interest rates go above 2%, then the Fed becomes a little concerned because they don't want interest rates to go out of hand. Right? They don't want to have runaway inflation. So they wanted to bring down inflation in the US. Right? So what a Federal Reserve or the central bank will do if interest rates are going out of control, if inflation is going out of control, is they'll start, now inflation is going out of control because there is excess demand in the economy. Now to cut down demand, to curtail demand, the only way is to, one way is to increase the cost of borrowing, the cost of funds, right? So interest rates will have to be increased if inflation gets out of hand. Now that's what started happening in the US. Inflation started increasing and the Federal Reserve started increasing interest rates. When interest rates started going up, most of these loans which were based on floating rates struggled to repay, right? Because their cost of debt started mounting. And when this cost starts going up, most people who had no assets, remember they had no assets, no repayment capacity, no earnings, they found it very difficult to keep up with the increase in interest costs, the increase in funding costs. So they started defaulting. Now, when a property loan start defaulting, banks would acquire the property and sell it off. Right. So that started happening in the US. Now, not just one or two customers, but the entire market started. This happened in the entire market, right? Everyone started selling their property. Banks started selling property. They started disposing of the assets. Now, banks, instead of lending, they became property. They came heavily into the property market, and it was mainly to sell. So the property market just crashed, went downhill. Right. So the value of the collateral started going down. Now, when that happens, even genuine borrowers might start defaulting. Right? That's because if the value of your collateral starts coming down, there is no point servicing a loan, right? Because the best option is to default. If you default, you can buy back the property at a lower price. Now, let's say, for example, you took a 1 million loan against your property. So the property initially may have been valued at 2 million bucks. Your loan was 1 million. So if the property value is 2 million, there is always an incentive for you to settle your loan, isn't it? Because if you default at that point, you will lose an asset which is worth 2 million. Yeah. So what happened was the property price started coming down, right? From 2 million, it started dropping to 1.5, 1 million, half a million, and then less. And your loan was 1 million. Now your loan is 1 million, property is worth half a million. And you had taken the loan to buy the property. Okay, so the best option in that case is to default. Because if you default, you can buy the property at half a million or less. You can take a fresh loan at a lower cost. You don't have to keep servicing a debt of 1 million when your asset value is only half a million. And so that's what started happening. Everyone, even genuine borrowers, started defaulting. So this became a crisis. It was called the housing bubble, the subprime mortgage crisis in the US. That's what happened in the US. So remember, all that happened because there was excess money in the economy, which was not sustainable, and banks started lending aggressively, right? Well, let's hope something like that doesn't happen. But right now, to avoid a crisis, there is no choice right now but to increase consumption, because the entire economy has suffered. And the World Bank has predicted deflation in Sri Lanka, negative 3% growth or whatever. That's not very healthy for the economy, right? Because Sri Lanka has to continue to grow. We are already lagging behind some of the regional peers. So the only option right now, if we can actually catch up, right now, because all economies have a setback. If Sri Lanka can aggressively catch up with most of the regional peers, this is the ideal time. Like when the entire world is slowing down, we have to accelerate. This is when we need to accelerate. So that's why central bank introduced all these measures, right, to try and stimulate the economy. They pumped in so much of money, 150 billion rupees, and then another 115 billion rupees of reserves were released last week. And so all that hopefully will kickstart the economy, and consumer sentiment will improve. So that's really good. No? When consumer sentiment improves, people start spending more and more. When people start spending more, companies, corporates, individuals start receiving more income, more revenue start coming in. Right? More revenue they receive, they will be able to look after their staff better. Then the staff also gets a higher salary, higher take-home pay, and they will start spending in turn. Right? So quality of life will improve. When the quality of life goes up, people start spending on other things like education, maybe healthcare, insurance, and all that. So everything works well if the economy is growing at a healthy pace. Right? So this is the ideal time if we are to catch up with all the other regional peers. Yeah. So let's hope things will work out, and we, right, as we form a big part of this economy, the banking and insurance sectors. So it's our responsibility that we make sure the customers are given the benefit, and we give them a free hand to kickstart the economy. Right? Otherwise, all of us are in trouble. So it's a very good initiative, fantastic initiative. In fact, people are talking about helicopter money and all that. That is where actually you don't have to print money, but instead of printing money, you put maybe a few zeros at the end of customers' account numbers, right? Something like that. It's called helicopter money. So all this, the objective is to give a spike, to spike consumption, so that the economy starts moving at a really fast pace. Okay. Right. So last week we saw the reserve being reduced by 2%. And the central bank is willing to has advised banks to lend to small and medium enterprises at 4%. Right? Fantastic interest rates. 4% is a rate which was offered on savings accounts about 2-3 months ago. 4% is what you got on your savings accounts. Now 4% is the rate that is now currently being offered for small and medium SMEs to borrow. Right? Fantastic. Because this is exactly what the economy wants. We don't want to fall behind. We need to lead the pack, right? Be in front. So more stimulus might be expected. Don't be surprised if there are more stimulus that are coming up, right? Maybe a real interest rate cut. So the central bank might reduce interest rates, maybe by 1%, by 2%, so that everything else just falls in place. And so it's going to be interesting times. But then the downside is there is a certain sector which relies on interest earnings, on interest income. Maybe the pensioners, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that interest is looked after. Whether for the next 3 to 6 months, you just let the pensioners take a bit of a hit so that the larger portion of the economy recovers, right? And when the economy recovers, we are able to look after pensioners in a better way. Right? So it's all about boosting confidence in the economy. If there is confidence, that's all the economy needs. No? Then they can take it and run. Right? So you need to infuse confidence in the economy. When economy there's confidence, people start investing more, then you automatically get foreign direct investments coming in. Sentiment is good, so there are positive vibes. People start investing more and more, spending more. Economy starts moving. Right? It's a smooth run in the economy. Right. So ideally, this will take place very soon, and hopefully, well, usually it takes about a month or two for all of these to trickle down into the economy. So let's hope it happens by the end of the month, and by July, the economy gets back to where it was, and even better. Right. So let's move on to liquidity management. I hope you all can see the slides. Can you all see those slides? And I hope you all have received the slides for today. Can you see these slides? Liquidity management. Are we on the same page? Can see the slides? I hope you all can see. Right. So liquidity management. Okay. The first question is, what is liquidity? Right. what is liquidity and why is liquidity important. Now, last week, if you all can remember, we did a couple of ratios, current ratio, acid test. Current ratio is current assets or current liabilities. Acid test is current ratio, is the current ratio minus the net of the impact on stocks, right? The stock valuation is subjective. You remove stocks from the equation. So it's current assets minus stocks divided by current liabilities. Now, these are measures of liquidity. How liquid is an organization. Or if it's in the case of a bank, you look at a ratio called liquid asset ratio. Very important ratio. Now, you all know that the liquid asset ratio of a bank is 20%. And if you are in breach of the 20%, then you are supposed to pay a penalty, right? It's a hefty penalty. That's 1 rupee for every 1,000 rupees per day, which is 36.5 rupees for, 365 rupees for a year, right? Effectively, it comes to 36.5%. So if you are in breach of the liquid asset ratio, you have to pay a huge fine. And for banks, it's 20%. Right. So why is liquidity management important? Now, by the way, liquidity means, for example, the best way I could explain is before you get married, you are liquid. And after you get married, you become more liquid, right? So that's liquidity. It means how fast you can convert from an illiquid asset into liquid asset, right? So for example, if you have a 100 rupee or 1,000 rupee note, it is very liquid. The most liquid form is cash. Because for you to go and buy a loaf of bread, you don't have to split it into further pieces, no? And you can just offer it and you get your bread, right? So you can convert it into cash or another asset very fast. That's called liquidity. But if you have 100% of your assets invested in land and you have no other assets, let's assume, because 100% invested in land, and if you want to buy a loaf of bread, then how do you do it? Can you sell your land immediately and get the cash and buy a loaf of bread? The answer is no, because it takes a lot of time and effort to sell land, unlike holding on to cash, right? So that's liquidity. How fast you can convert into cash or into another asset. But the downside of liquidity is it has a negative relationship with returns, right? You hold on to cash, you keep money in your pocket, it's not going to earn you any interest, zero interest. So remember, cash earns zero interest. Whereas if your asset is illiquid, usually the returns are higher, right? So land and buildings or property, the returns are usually higher. Capital appreciates by a higher rate than cash. Okay, so it's a trade-off between your liquidity needs and profitability. If you want to be profitable, maybe you'll have to cut down on your liquidity. Right? So lower the liquidity, higher the profitability. Also higher the risk, because if you are short of liquidity, remember what we did last week, the gearing ratio. It's your borrowed funds divided by the total equity, right? Now, if gearing is high, that means you have borrowed more and you're short of liquidity. You will borrow more if you're short of liquidity now. So if you have borrowed more, the higher the borrowing, higher the risk, right? So that's how it works, liquidity. Also lower the borrowing, lower the risk, and lower the return. Now, how do you manage liquidity? So liquidity is one of the most important tasks for a bank, not only for a bank, but even for an individual or even a company. Right? Liquidity is a key criteria to decide on the going concern. Right. And so we want to liquidity. liquidity is one of the most important tasks, right? For not only for banks, for organizations, for individuals, you name it, liquidity is very important. If you don't have liquidity, you can't do anything. No? You can't even buy a loaf of bread, right? If you don't have cash, assuming you don't have credit cards and all that, you can't buy even your meals. And so liquidity is so important. A bank is considered to be liquid if it has ready access to immediately spendable funds at a reasonable cost and precisely at the time the funds are needed. And so if you have funds, if you don't have funds when it is needed, you might have to borrow. And if you are supposed to borrow at an extremely high cost, then the point is the purpose is defeated. Now, for example, let's look at what happened to the finance. If the finance has a liquidity shortfall, they have a borrowing requirement. Are they able to borrow? The answer is no, they can't. And no one is willing to lend to them now. Banks have cut all their lines, all their ties. So they don't have access to funds, right? Even if they have access, they will have to borrow at a very high cost, exorbitantly high cost. They can't borrow at normal market rates. Now they can't borrow, for example, at the 4% rate. No one is willing to lend. Their borrowing cost will be extremely high, may be even close to 40–50%, right? So high. If at all they want to borrow and if someone is willing to lend, even at those levels, no one will lend. Now this liquidity need came to the finance not today, but some time back, right? When they were short of liquidity and they entered the process of being wound up, the winding up process. Right? So not having liquidity at the time you need at the right cost is pointless. So you need to make sure your liquidity is there when you most need it, when you need it the most. Right? If liquidity comes later, or if liquidity is coming now at a higher cost, more than what you can afford, then the purpose is defeated. A liquid bank has the right amount of immediately spendable funds in hand. Right? So you should have the right amount of money in hand. Now, why would you need money? We'll get to that. Or it can quickly raise funds by borrowing or selling assets. Right? Now, these are two things a bank can do. If it's short of liquidity, it can either borrow funds. It can borrow maybe from the money market, interbank borrowings, call money, repos, right? We have covered this. Or by selling assets. So if you cannot borrow, then the next option is to sell your assets, right? Now, for example, banks might be able to sell their treasury bills or treasury bonds. They are selling your assets. When you sell your assets, you realize cash. That's one way of generating liquidity. Lack of liquidity is the first sign that a bank has financial troubles. Right now, for a bank, it's a disaster to run short of liquidity. If a bank doesn't have liquidity, now imagine if a customer who has deposited $1 million comes to your bank and wants it withdrawn, right? Maybe at maturity, maybe before maturity. Right? That's a funny thing, because sometimes customers want their money back before it matures. Now imagine you tell the customer you are unable to pay. Right? What will happen? All hell is going to break loose. Yeah, that will be the end of the bank. No. Now, if you tell any customer that you don't have money, very sorry, come back tomorrow, come back next week. That's the end of the story, right? So remember, it's all about your reputation. If you're short of liquidity, then your reputation is going to suffer. That's the main issue. So remember, for a bank, liquidity and reputation go hand in hand. But you can't separate the two when it comes to a bank. Even for a corporate, that's the same thing. Because if a corporate is unable to settle its obligations, its suppliers, no one is going to deal with that corporate. Same goes for a bank. But the risk for a bank is, now the bank has a fiduciary responsibility to look after the deposits of customers, of depositors. And if they don't have liquidity to settle your depositors, then you're in breach of your fiduciary responsibility. You can be taken to courts you can be sued, you can be filed for bankruptcy, right? So if there is no liquidity, banks will lose deposits because word of mouth spreads very quickly. In this digital age, you tell a customer you're unable to pay his deposit back, he will just go and put it on Facebook, right? That's the end of the story. Then the whole world knows that you don't have liquidity. Right? So they will lose deposits. Then other customers also will panic. They will come to your bank, they will queue up and they will demand for their cash. Okay, so that will create chaos, no? Because there might be a valid reason for you not being able to settle your customer. It may be the branch that day short of that amount of cash and it's unable to source funds within a short period of time. There may be a valid reason, but it doesn't reflect good. So everyone starts coming and demanding for their money back. Then the bank is going to face a huge issue. Everyone wants money. You can't service one customer. Everyone comes and withdraws. Because banking is based on the law of large numbers. No? Yeah, your primary assumption is that all your depositors will not come and ask for money on the same day. If that happens, then you're finished. Right? So you assume that customers will not demand for their deposits on the same day. So banks will lose deposits if that happens, if their reputation is tarnished because of lack of liquidity. Then they will have to dispose. They might have to dispose liquid assets. Right? So liquid assets might have to be sold. So that's why banks might start selling. Well, initially they might use the cash reserves that they have. If cash is short, then they go to the next liquid asset, right, which is their treasury bill and treasury bond base. So banks will have a stock of treasury bills and bonds, which they can use in the case of an emergency. So if there is an emergency, one thing they might do is, before they sell their treasury bills and bonds, they might evaluate the option of borrowing. Borrowing from markets, right? So they might use call money, repo, all these facilities. Then they might go to SLF. If SLF doesn't work, they might have to go to the bank rate. They might have to borrow at the bank rate, right, which is now at 9.5%. If that doesn't work, then they might have to consider selling some of the assets, right? They might have to sell their treasury bills or treasury bonds, right? You might sell your treasury bills and bonds and you might make a loss, you might make a profit. If you're making a profit, then fantastic. But if you're forced to sell at a loss, you might still have to do it, right? So then you're getting rid of your liquid assets and you're taking a big hit on the P&L. This is something that a bank has to be really mindful of. But these days, of course, since interest rates are dropping, banks are also laughing. They are sitting on a lot of unrealized profits. So they will have to dispose liquid assets. Then they might have to borrow at higher rates or will have to place collateral. So if a bank is short of money right now, in the worst case scenario of the finance, having to borrow, no one will be willing to lend to the finance on a clean basis. Nothing doing on a clean basis, right? If at all, they will have to pledge maybe with 50% haircut and borrow. And even that will come at a very high rate. Other banks will pull the plug, right? No one is going to lend call money. Clean basis, sorry, nothing doing. So you always have to pledge your collateral. Your collateral might be any asset. It could be your treasury bills or bonds, which in that case, it will be called a repo, right? So remember, liquidity management is very, very important. It can make or break a bank. A bank is considered to be liquid if it has ready access to immediately spendable funds. Remember? Ready access, right? So access should come immediately, not with a lag. Your customer comes to you for a withdrawal, you should have ready access to the cash, no? And give it back, right? At a reasonable cost. The cost should be manageable. It should not be exorbitantly high. At precisely the time the funds are needed. Right? A liquid bank has the right amount of immediately spendable funds in hand So you have the right amount of cash in hand and can quickly raise funds by borrowing or selling assets. So you can either borrow or sell your assets if there is a liquidity need. Right, so how does a bank? Any questions up to now? No questions, so we can move on. Supply and demand for liquidity. Now, what are the factors that leads to the supply of liquidity and what factors cause demand for liquidity? Right, supply. Where does a bank get liquidity? Now, in this section, we'll be focusing on a bank's point of view. Right, we will not look at from a corporate's point of view. But the corporate also might be similar. Now, for example, for a bank, supply will come in the form of deposits, right? Also in the form of capital. Now, the minimum capital for a bank is very soon going to be 20 billion. In a couple of years, I think that will be implemented. So capital, there'll be some banks which are short of the 20 billion minimum capital requirement. So there will have to be a capital infusion coming in. Maybe the existing owners might have to pump some money, or there might be a listing or a rights issue, right? So that's one source of funds from capital. A capital infusion brings in liquidity. When liquidity comes, then you need deposits, right? Because a bank is all about leveraging. You get a certain capital base and you can leverage on top of that, right? The more you leverage, the bigger you become. Yeah, so there'll be deposits, then revenue from sale of non-deposit services. There'll be other revenues coming in, right? Commission income, fee-based income. All these will bring in your revenues. Loan repayments, customers start settling loans. Then also your supply increases. Sale of bank assets, right? You might sometimes dispose your used vehicles, certain other furniture and fittings and all that, right? So you might sell some of your assets after their economic life. Borrowings from money markets. You can also borrow. When you borrow, you will have cash inflows, right? So that will bring in money. Also equity infusions, right? Then demand for liquidity. Demand comes from withdrawals. When a customer comes and asks for money or he withdraws from the ATM, there is demand. Granting loans. When you give a loan to a customer, the guy will take the money out. Right? So loans will mean there is demand for liquidity. Repayment of non-deposit borrowings. Now, there might be interbank borrowings, maybe call money borrowings, which you have done from other banks. So when these mature, you have to repay them. Expenses and taxes, right? Day-to-day expenses, operational expenses, maybe rent, electricity, your utility bills, taxes. Banking sector is having huge taxes. Now it used to be 50%, it is now down to about 40%. Dividend, right? To your cash, your investors, you have to pay dividends. Then interest cost to customers, you have to pay interest to your customers. Then what about your other services like your insurance? You have to pay premiums. Right? That will create demand for liquidity. Okay. So the net liquidity position of a bank is the difference between your supply and demand for liquidity. Very simple, right? What is the difference between your supply, that means your inflows, and demand, outflows? That's called net liquidity position. If it's positive, that means you have more supply than demand. That means you have more deposits coming in and less deposits going out, being withdrawn. So positive net liquidity position means liquidity surplus. There's a liquidity surplus, right? You have a net surplus. You'll be left with a residual value. Management needs to decide when and where to invest the surplus profitably until they are needed to cover future liquidity demands. Okay. So the management, this is where your management skills come into play. You need to know how to utilize, make use of the surplus, right? One thing is, you know, you have a surplus. The next thing is you should know how you are going to utilize the surplus. Now that is the crucial thing. Calculating net liquidity position is very simple. What really matters is what you're going to do with that knowledge. How are you going to use your knowledge of the net liquidity position? Right. So it's, you know, it's a supply minus the demand. If you have a net surplus, then how are you going to utilize your surplus cash? Where are you going to invest? How long is the surplus going to last? Is it a temporary thing or a long-term thing? If it's long-term, then maybe you should focus on long-term asset products, long-term assets. You should also know what is going to happen to interest rates. If interest rates are going up, then what sort of assets do you need to focus on? Right? So that's if you are running a positive position. You can also do maybe a little bit of trading. If it doesn't, it's unlikely to last for long and there's a trading opportunity, maybe you can use of trading opportunities. Then if your liquidity position, your net liquidity position is negative, that means you have more demand than supply or less supply than demand. You have a liquidity deficit, right? Now, if you are a deficit, you're running a deficit. If you expect a deficit, you should know how you are going to fund the deficit. Are you going to use the short-term borrowings, long-term borrowings, or are you going to sell some of your assets? How long is the deficit going to last? At what cost are you going to borrow? What is the reliability of the source of borrowing? Then is the facility available indefinitely? Can you borrow whenever you want? All these things need to be looked at. Right. So let's run through this example. Bank A faces following cash inflows and outflows, right? So they have inflows as well as outflows. Deposit withdrawals expected 3,300 million. Okay, so you expect withdrawals of 3,300. Loan repayment of 108,000. Operating expenses 5,100. New loan request 294,000. Sale of assets 1,800. New deposits 670,000. Money market borrowings 4,300. Non-deposit service fee. The repayment of bank is borrowings and dividends. Okay, so this is the position you are exposed to, you have come across. So there are cash inflows as well as outflows. Now, based on this, how do you calculate your net liquidity position? Remember, it's the supply minus demand. Can you all quickly calculate? And give me the answer. What do you think? What is your net liquidity position going to be? Yeah, so let's do the calculation. They face the following cash inflows and outflows. First one is deposit withdrawal. So there is a withdrawal coming up. So net liquidity position is the supply of liquidity minus demand for liquidity. Withdrawals 3,300, right? So withdrawal is what, supply or demand? Withdrawal is a demand. 3,300 demand. Loan repayment 108,000, which is a supply. You're getting 108,000. Operating expenses, demand or supply. Operating expenses is demand, right? So it's part of your demand. New loan request. That is also demand. Sale of assets. Demand or supply. Sale of assets is supply. When you sell assets, you receive money. New deposit, you are receiving money. You are receiving liquidity. New deposit 670,000. Money market borrowing, right? So borrowing, remember, when you borrow, you receive. When you settle your borrowing, you pay. Right? So money market borrowing is supply. Non-deposit service fee. Right? Let's assume you are charging the fee. So you are receiving, or there is a supply of 2,700. Repayment of a borrowing. Repayment, if you are settling, there is demand 2,300. Dividend payment. Let's assume you are paying dividends at the end of the year, 14,000. So these are the items. $318,700. So your net $468,100. Okay. I hope you all got the same answer. Right, so your net liquidity position is 468,100. Now the challenge, the real challenge is, what do you do with your surplus? Right, you have a surplus. It's not a deficit. It is a surplus of 468,100. What do you do with the surplus? It's good to calculate, but then you should know it. Based on your answer, what is your next course of action? Right, what are you going to do with the surplus? Now, in the case of the surplus, you have a surplus. Is it good to have a surplus? If it's bad to have a deficit, there's no such thing. Might be bad to have a surplus also, right? Because a surplus means you are getting cash, but you have no way of investing. No? If you have no way of investing, you might end up investing in assets which give maybe negative returns, maybe poor returns or low returns. So that also is not good, right? But if you have a surplus and the winds are in favor, right? If winds are in favor, if the winds are favorable, then you can lend it out, right? Maybe lend it out to a good sector, a decent growth sector, or you invest your cash, right? If the surplus is going to be available for a long period of time, you can lend it out for a long period of time. If it's short period, you lend out for a shorter period. Okay, so that's how it works. Now, by any chance, if this was a deficit, if it was a negative figure, then you have to figure out how are you going to fund the deficit. And being a deficit is not necessarily bad, but as long as you can fund it and fund it at a reasonable cost. Okay? And you should also receive it when you need. The funding should come when it's needed. All right, so I hope that was clear. Any questions on that, on the net liquidity position? No questions? Okay, so no questions can mean either you understood everything or you understood nothing. Yeah. Niroshan, I hope all is well. And so the next slide, liquidity has a crucial time dimension, right? So remember, liquidity, it's very important to look at liquidity in terms of time. When are you short of liquidity, or when are you having a surplus of liquidity? Immediate needs, there might be sudden deposits, withdrawals, right? If there is a sudden withdrawal, you did not expect a customer with 10 billion rupee deposit wants the money back immediately, right? Maybe he wants to purchase a property from another bank. So if that is the case, you might have to transfer money out immediately. Right? A huge strain on your liquidity. Borrowing from another bank can be used to meet this. If it's within your borrowing limits, then you can borrow from another bank if they are willing to lend. Long-term needs might arise from seasonal, cyclical, or trend factors. Right? So seasonal factors, cyclical, or even trend factors can create long-term needs. And so what are seasonal, cyclical, or trend? Now, seasonal is something like the New Year season or Christmas season. There is a seasonal demand that comes in. Now, during these festive seasons, usually generally people prefer to hold on to liquidity. So if that is the case, then you might expect deposits to be withdrawn ahead of the season. Then there are bonus payments that corporates need to make during these periods. And so there might be withdrawals coming up from corporates. They might withdraw cash. So you should expect reasonable levels of liquidity to go out during these periods. Cyclical means the economic cycles, right? Like every economy goes through cycles. There can be a boom in the economy. Maybe there might be a recession. All that might start happening. A boom, recession, maybe a stable period. So depending on that, you might have your demand levels fluctuating. Then the trend factors. Now, trend means if you look at the last 10 years, what has happened to the demand side? Has demand been going up for liquidity or demand been going down? If the economy overall was growing at a healthy pace, that means you might have a reasonable amounts of deposit as well as loan growth happening. Right? Because if the economy is contracting, that might not be the case. Bankers can plan for this. They can advertise to get deposits. Right? So if you're short of deposits, usually if banks start advertising, that means they are short of deposits. If they start advertising for deposits. But if you see a lot of banks start advertising for loans, it's like Appenut credit card gun. apeno 1,000 loan a gun. That means they are sitting on a pile of money. They have no way of disposing, so they are creating awareness amongst customers. They are almost pleading to customers to come and take a loan, then accumulate liquid assets, right? So if you, based on your liquidity position, you can start advertising. Maybe if you are short of deposits, you can call for deposits. You can say your deposit rates are these, the best rates in the market, you won't get it anywhere, and we come to your doorstep and collect your deposit. You offer the value additions. So if you are short of, if you are sitting a lot of cash, then you can advertise your loan products, asset products. The banks can also accumulate liquid assets. They can maybe buy treasury bills, bonds, and repo them out if they are short of liquidity. Or they can go for long-term borrowings, right? Long-term borrowings, not short-term, but long-term borrowings. They can maybe negotiate for loans from other counterparties, maybe from overseas, and they can, if it's a foreign loan, then they can swap it. Most liquidity problems arise from outside the bank as a result of the financial activities of customers. Let's say if you're short of liquidity, it might not be your problem. It might be something to do with the economy, something to do with the perception customers have about you. And if you're unable to settle your debt, withdrawals, for example, customers might gang up against you. And they might demand for their deposits to be withdrawn. Now that might happen not because you're short of cash, but your competitor, the next door neighbor, is short of cash. Right? So all the customers have queued up at your neighbor's place, your neighbor's bank, to withdraw all the neighboring bank to withdraw all the cash. Then customers might come to that bank, but they might also see your bank. If this bank is short of liquidity, maybe the other bank is also short, no? Right? So bank A is short, they panic, they go to bank B also. Right? That creates chaos. It can happen, right? That's why it's very sensitive that the non-bank financial sector is stable. Liquidity problem is a continuous issue. Rarely the demand and supply of liquidity matches at a given time. Now, ideally, your demand should be equal to your supply, then you're not left with any surpluses or deficits, but that never happens. It never happens. You're either left with a surplus or a deficit, which you need to manage. Negative relationship between bank liquidity and profitability. So if you think your liquidity has to be a surplus, and you keep lots of liquidity, you keep your entire asset base in cash or the bulk of your assets in cash, maybe 40% liquid asset ratio, against you're looking at a bank which has a 20% ratio, then the 40% might have obviously will have a low profitability. That's right. So that's the relationship between liquidity and profitability. It's a negative relationship. Liquidity problem is a continuous issue, so it's not something that you can fix. It's not a one-time thing. It's not like a one-night stand. You have to continue to be at it. right? So it's not something that you can fix for one time. It is a continuous exercise. You need to keep monitoring your liquidity position on maybe on a daily basis. Right? So that's what the treasurer does. He has to monitor, because the bank's entire liquidity position is with the treasury. Right? He is the guy, the treasurer is the guy who sees where the liquidity is. If the bank has surpluses, he will see what amount of liquidity they have. So if it's very high, if it's not sustainable, then maybe they're offering too high deposit rates, right? So deposit rates may have to be cut down. Whereas if the liquidity is short, maybe the bank is short of deposits. So perhaps you should slow down on lending or increase deposit rates. Right? So that's where the treasurer's role comes into play. Very crucial. He has to alert his ALCO or the CEO about the bank's liquidity status. Okay, so negative relationship between liquidity and profitability, as we discussed. Yeah, so any questions up to now? No questions? You all can ask any question you want. Right, interest rate risk and liquidity. Okay. Now going back to the same example, that what we were doing, the previous example, you are left with a liquidity surplus. So that's good or bad. It depends on interest, your view of interest rates. If you feel interest rates are going up, right, and then it might be good to have a surplus. But then the next thing is how then you should deploy your surplus for a short term, because if you deploy for the short term and rates go up, you can benefit from interest rate increases. But if you assume if you had invested long term at low rates, right, then you will take a hit. Okay, so it's how well you manage your liquidity against interest rate forecasts. If interest rates rise, financial assets that the bank plans to sell to raise funds will decline in value. If interest rates go up, assets that you have will decline in value. Right? Now that's the relationship between the yield and the price yield relationship, which is part of our next session. We will cover that in detail. So remember, when rates go up, the value of assets will fall. Right? It is the value of any asset. Now, for example, the easiest way for you to think is if interest rates go up, right? If interest rates go up, will you prefer to take a chance and invest in an asset, or will you prefer to have your money in a bank? The answer is you will prefer to have your money in the bank, right? Now, let's say there are bank deposits that offer 20%. 20% FD rates. So when bank is offering 20% FD rate, you don't have to take a chance and invest anywhere else. No, you're happy with the 20% return. You settle with your bank deposit, right? So no one starts withdrawing money and investing in assets. So there will be supply of assets, but no demand. Then the price comes down. So when interest rates go up, the price of assets usually come down. The same applies in the case of bonds. If interest rates go up, the price of bonds start coming down. And when rates go down, the price of bonds start going up. Likewise, when rates are up, the price of stocks start coming down. When interest rates are low, the price of stocks start going up. Because people tend to take interest rate risk, or they try to take more risk if interest rates are low. And if asset values decline, you will make losses and raise little liquidity by selling them. Right? If you sell when the asset price is low, you will make losses. And borrowing cost will also go up. If you are short of liquidity, you have a deficit, and interest rates go up, your borrowing cost will also increase. Right? Typical reasons for liquidity problems: there will be maturity mismatches. You borrow large amounts of money for short-term deposits and reserves, and make long-term loans. So typically banks get FDs for 1 year, or they get savings and current accounts, right? Savings and current account balances will vanish in no time. Whereas FD rates, at least the deposit that is placed on FDs will be placed for 1 year. Right? But if you look at housing loans, 15, 20 years, long-term loans, asset is long-term, your liability is short-term. So you will have maturity mismatches. Now, what happens if all of your customers withdraw money after 1 year and you have given 20-year loans, housing loans? Then you're in a big problem. So there'll be maturity mismatches. You borrow large amounts of short-term deposits and reserves and make long-term loans, right? So the maturity is always a mismatch. Banks make money on this mismatch. Banks sensitivity to changes in interest rates, right? So when interest rates rise, depositors withdraw money searching for higher returns. The value of assets will decline, and the increase the borrowing cost in money markets. So you will run short of liquidity when interest rates go up, and money market rates will also be high. So it's very difficult for you to bridge the gap. Banks must give high priority to meeting demand for liquidity. If you can't meet your demand for liquidity, there'll be reputation risk. Your reputation is going to suffer. It's going to go for a 6. Strategies for liquidity managers, you can have asset liquidity management or asset conversion strategies, right? A borrowed liquidity management or liability liquidity management and balance liquidity management. So these are the 3 strategies. Remember, liquidity can be managed using these 3 strategies. So let's look at each of them. Asset liquidity management or asset conversion strategies. And now this is the safest approach. It's also the oldest approach, right? It is used by smaller banks generally. Asset conversion strategies used by smaller banks, which cannot take a huge risk. If your risk appetite is low, then you might have to go for asset conversion strategies. That means you store all of your liquidity needs in the form of liquid assets. Maybe you have the bulk of your liquidity needs in the form of cash or even in treasury bills or bonds. Right? So that's how you store liquidity. Store in liquidity in the form of liquid assets, cash or marketable securities like treasury bills or bonds. Liquid funds are raised by converting non-cash assets into cash. So liquid assets will have a ready market. That means it's easy to access markets. And stable price doesn't move violently, right? There is not a lot of volatility, but volatility is manageable levels. Must be reversible. Seller can recover original investment with little or no risk. Right? Yeah. So you can sell at arm's length transactions. You don't have to force sell. These are the liquid assets that a bank will have. Treasury bills, what you maintain at central bank, the purchase like your STF and all. Purchase of liquid assets on the repos. Placements with other banks, like your even including your Nostro accounts. Municipal bonds, government agency securities, commercial papers, like that short-term corporate debt, remember, is commercial paper, what we discussed a couple of weeks back. Euro currency deposits. These are your Nostro account balances which you have overseas. So asset liquidity management continuing is a strategy which is used by smaller banks, less risky, right? Because you have liquidity needs. When you want, you can give. You don't have to go to other sources. Cost involves a bank loses future earnings because all of your assets are stored in liquid assets, right? Remember, liquid assets give low returns, so your future earnings potential will reduce. Then there'll be transaction or commission cost, because if you sell frequently, if you convert your assets like your treasury bills and bonds frequently, you might have to pay brokerage, RTGS cost, and all that transaction cost. There can be capital losses, right? Because interest rates, if rates go up, then you make losses. It will weaken the balance sheet because you're selling the lower risk securities, right? So it will have an impact on your capital adequacy ratios, on your risk weighted assets and all that. And storing assets in the form of liquid assets will reduce your profitability. Management should sell at least the least profit potential assets first to reduce opportunity cost. If you are desperate and you have to sell your assets, then sell the least profit potential assets first. Right? You don't sell your most profitable product first. Sell the least profitable product first. Right? That is what companies like Hemas has done, isn't it? If you all were following Hemas, their results were released just a couple of days back. They had sold their less profitable leisure segment, right? And the consumer staples are doing well, whereas leisure sector was a drag on the company, and that was disposed. Right, so that was asset liquidity management. Next one is borrowed or liability liquidity management. Now this is used by bigger banks which have access to call money markets, right? They have bigger lines from other banks. They depend on purchase liquidity, which means borrowing enough immediately spendable funds to cover all anticipated demand for liquidity. So you borrow whatever you need. You don't keep a stash of cash. Advantage is you borrow only when it actually needs to be funded. No need to hold less profitable liquid assets, right? So you don't hold on to less profitable assets. You borrow only when you want. It will not change the composition and the volume of asset portfolio. The composition will not be changed. Sources of borrowing, right? If these banks, the larger banks, the bigger boys borrow, they will use central bank borrowings, SLF, or they might sell liquid assets. They might issue certificate of CDs, euro deposits. Like remember what we did last week, your GDR, global deposit receipt, interbank borrowings, call money borrowings. So borrowed liquidity management is used by larger banks. The bigger boys will use it. Very risky because if another bank has cut lending lines, then it's going to be banned. Right now, last week, most of I think about 10 or 11 banks and financial institutions in Sri Lanka got upgrades. Ratings were upgraded. Yeah, for example, HNB rating was upgraded from A minus, AA minus to AA plus. Right? They are just one notch below AAA. AAA is the highest possible credit rating. HNB is one notch below. Commercial bank is also somewhere there. Ceylon went from A minus to A. So likewise, lots of financial institutions and banks got their ratings upgraded by Fitch. Right. Disadvantage of borrowed liquidity management: borrowing costs can vary. Right. So exposed to money market rates. Sometimes it may not be available. Other banks may not be willing to lend. It can lead to bank runs. So if these bigger banks, no matter how big they are, if they don't have access to liquidity, they can lead to a bank run. Like what happened to Lehman Brothers. Most banks, remember, it's a trade-off between profitability and liquidity. Now, which one is more important? Is it profitability or is it liquidity? In your opinion, what is more important? Liquidity, remember, is as important as liquidity is as important as profitability, if not more important. If you're short of profits, it doesn't matter, you might survive. But if you don't have liquidity, huge problem. Right? You might not last long. That's what happened. Remember, in the first class, we covered Barings Bank. Barings Bank was profitable, but they had no liquidity. No choice but to wind up. So remember, running short of liquidity, if you're too short of liquidity, if it's not manageable, then you're having huge issues. Then balanced liquidity management strikes a balance between asset conversion strategies and liability liquidity management. Some of the expected demand for liquidity are stored in assets, while other anticipated liquidity demands are met by arrangements for lines of credit from correspondent banks and other supply of funds. Right? So you meet somewhere in between asset liquidity management and liability liquidity management. Right? So you try to enjoy the best of both worlds. Unexpected needs are met by near-term borrowings. Longer term needs can be planned for and the funds to meet them parked in short term and medium term, long term loans and securities. So you need to know, strike a balance, part of your assets in liquid assets, the other part in long term assets. Guidelines: you must keep track of activities of all fundraising and fund using departments within the bank and coordinate the activities, right? So if you're managing the liquidity, you should know what are the demand for funds, who is generating supply. Okay, the supply of funds will come from the liability side. That means the guys who are going after deposits. The demand comes from the lenders, right? You should know in advance, whenever possible, when the bank's biggest credit or deposit customers plan to withdraw their funds or add to their deposits. You should know well in advance when the bank's biggest depositors, right? You should know who are your largest depositors. How big are the largest 20 depositors? What sort of amount have they invested? If the largest depositor goes out, if the bank collapses, then there's something radically wrong, right? And that's why concentration risk is so risky for banks. So you should know when the largest depositors or borrowers are planning either to deposit or to withdraw or to take a facility. In cooperation with CD managers and directors, must make sure the bank's priorities and objectives for liquidity management are clear. Liquidity management is given the highest priority because, as we discussed, liquidity is very crucial. No control over sources, but the bank can control the users. You can't control, you can't force customers to come and deposit. You can't hold a gun to their head and tell them to come and deposit money, right? So you can't control the inflows, but you can control outflows. If you're lending aggressively, you can maybe curtail lending. Banks' liquidity needs and liquidity decisions must be analyzed on a continuous basis to avoid excess and deficit liquidity questions, right? So liquidity needs has to be analyzed on a day-to-day basis, on a day-to-day basis. Estimating a bank's liquidity needs. Okay, so any questions up to now? No questions? Okay, so let's move on. Estimating a bank's liquidity needs, there are three methods: sources and uses of funds. Right? So Niroshan, you've been quiet, no questions. Sources and uses of funds approach, the structure of funds approach, and the liquidity indicator approach. Each method rests on specific assumptions and yield only an approximate of actual liquidity requirement at any given time. Right? Sources and uses of funds approach. Now, this is one way of estimating your liquidity needs. Banks' liquidity rises and deposits increase and loans decrease. Right? So your liquidity goes up if deposits go up, obviously, and if loans go down, then the net liquidity position increases. It's a positive gap. The liquidity declines when deposits decrease, right? So when there are withdrawals, deposits go down and the loans increase. That's called a negative gap. Okay. Remember, net liquidity position is the supply minus demand. So when deposits go out and loans increase, you have a negative gap. Whenever the sources and uses of liquidity do not match, the bank has a liquidity gap. If there is no match, there can be a liquidity gap. Steps in this approach: loans and deposits must be forecast. You must forecast loans and deposits for a given liquidity planning period. The estimated change of the same must be calculated and must estimate the bank's net liquidity funds if it's a deficit or a surplus. Estimating loans, the bank can use statistical techniques, right? You can analyze the past and project the future. Management, judgment, and experience can be used. Loans for a period is a function of economic growth. Right? Your loans is a function of economic growth, GDP. When the GDP is growing, usually the demand for loans will also increase. Projected quarterly corporate earnings. Usually, if corporate earnings are high, then the company is doing more and more business, so there might be more and more borrowings coming from the company. Rate of growth in the nation's money supply. If money supply is high, then usually the bank gets more deposits. Projected prime bank loan rate minus the commercial paper rate. So the credit spread. Right? When the credit spread increases, usually loans dry up. Then there's an estimated rate of inflation. When inflation is high, people spend less because interest rates go up, and then you get more deposits. Deposits are a function of the growth in personal income, right? When your income, when your salary increases, you deposit more and more in banks. Estimated increase in retail sales. Okay, so when retail sales go up, when consumer demand goes up, deposits will also go up. The rate of growth in the nation's money supply. When money supply goes up, your deposit base will also increase. Projected yield on money market deposits. When you offer higher interest rates, you're likely to get more deposits. And then the rate of inflation. Sources and uses of fund approach estimates liquidity deficits or surplus for the coming period. Right? It's the estimated change in deposits minus estimated change in loans. By what amount is your deposit base going to change minus the change in loans. So let's write this down. So this is the equation that you need to remember. You need to remember and memorize this equation. Okay, Lakmini, what is the best approach in this current context of Sri Lanka? Best approach for what? And future deposits and loans can be divided into three components, like we explained last a few minutes ago: trend component, seasonal component, and the cyclical component. So you can look at the trend, the seasonality, and the cyclicality of deposits and loans. So let's work on this example. Suppose that the bank estimates its total deposits for the next 6 months will be 112, 132, 121, 147, 151, and 139. While its loans will total an estimated 87, 95, 102, 113, 101, and 124 respectively over the same 6 months. All figures are in billions. Under the sources and uses of funds approach, when does this bank face liquidity deficits, if any? Right, so sources and uses of funds, the change in liquidity in deposits minus the change in loans, right? So that gives you the estimated liquidity surplus or deficit. So over the 6 months period, you have deposits 112, 132, 121, 147, 151, 139. Right? So the next step, let's write down the loans also. Loans 87, 95, 102, 113, 101, and 124. And so these are the loan and deposit bases for the next 6 months. Right? So what is the change in deposit, your deposits? The change, either the increase or the drop in deposits, right? So 112, second month 132. That means your deposits have gone up. That means there is a supply. Supply has gone up by 20. Change in deposit base by 20. It's a plus 20, right? So the next month 132 has reduced to 121. There is a drop of 11. Liquidity is reducing by 11 the next month because deposits are going up. Then going from 121 to 147, an increase of 26. 147 to 151 is an increase of 4. 151 to 139 is a drop of 12. And then the change in loans. Loans are increasing from 87 to 95. That means there is an outflow of 8, negative 8. Then 95 is going up to 102, further outflow of 7. Loans are increasing. Then 102 to 113 is an increase of 11 and further outflow. 113 to 101, loan base reduces, right? So there is an inflow, settlement of 12 plus. 101 to 124, loan is increasing by 23 minus. So the estimated liquidity surplus or deficit which is the change in deposits minus the change in loans. Right. So the second month, your deposit base is increasing by 20. You're getting a supply of 20. Loans increasing by 8. Loans are increasing by 8, then loans are increasing by 7, going up by 11, dropping by 12, and increasing by 23. This is the loan projection. And in terms of loans only, not in cash flows, but in loans. So the estimated surplus or deficit, the change in deposits, 20, minus increase in loans, 8. You will have a net of 12. Right? You will have 12 coming into the bank during the first month. A net inflow of 12. Then minus 11 minus 7 is minus 18. It's like third month. 26 minus 11, 15. Third month. 4 minus 12 minus 16. And minus 12 minus 23 is minus 35. right? So liquidity shortfalls will come during these months, right? Wherever the net position is negative. And this is the crucial point, 35. There will be 35 billion short in the 6th month, right? How are you going to tackle it? Okay, liquidity strategies when interest rates are going down. Well, it's a very crucial call because you'll have to analyze you'll have to actually analyze this situation, right? Yeah, you'll have to estimate what is going to happen to your deposit base and loan base. If you feel deposits are going to go out for some reason, maybe people are trying to pull out cash and invest in stock market, then there'll be an outflow of liquidity. If loans are going to increase, there'll be a further outflow. So your liquidity is going to be strained. Yeah. There's no best method. Each bank can use their own method. So this is one. The sources and uses of fund method. Right. So based on these estimates, you should know where you're going to end up. What is your net liquidity position going to be? Now, you'll see that you're short during the 3rd, 5th, and 6th months. How do you bridge these deficits? 5th and 6th months, consecutively short months. Consecutively short months. So you should have adequate liquidity buffers during those months. Okay, and maybe during the 4th month, you can't lend for long term because the 5th month you're going to go short. Okay, so all these need to be looked at. Yes, John. Which one is 8? 8 into minus 8. Yeah. Right. Because I'm looking not at, it's not from the cash flow point of view. This is in terms of loan growth, right? What I wrote earlier is from cash flows. But look at it from the loan growth. Loan growth is plus 8, right? Okay, so that's clear. So this is sources and uses of funds. Next one is structure of funds. Under structure of funds, you need to look at how your deposits are structured. Bank deposits and other fund sources are divided into categories based on the estimated probability of being withdrawn and therefore lost to the bank. So what is the likelihood of a deposit being withdrawn? Now, some of your customers, there are several types of customers. Now, some of our customers, for a 0.5% difference or a 0.25% difference, they will quickly run to the next bank. Right? There are other customers, whatever the difference, they don't go to any other bank. They will say, "Ape tata ke bank ko maker." They will stick to that bank. They are loyal to the bank. Right? Now, which kind of customers do you prefer? The first category who runs after rates, or the rate sensitive guys, or the second category who are loyal to the bank? All banks will prefer loyal customers. That's why you reward customers for their loyalty. Okay, so the guys who are rate sensitive are called hot money. So you will have hot money liabilities, deposits and other borrowed funds at central banks that are very interest rate sensitive or that management is sure will be withdrawn during the current period is called hot money. Vulnerable funds, deposits which are likely to be withdrawn, deposits of which a substantial portion, perhaps 25 or 30%, will probably be removed from the bank during the current period, right? So part of these deposits will go, but not all. Stable funds is a long-term sticky base. Core deposits and liabilities, the funds that management considers most unlikely to be removed from the bank, stable funds. Structure of funds approach. Liquidity manager must set aside liquid funds according to some desired operational rule for each of 3 kinds of funds. If your bank is full of hot money, that means the bulk of it will go out. No sooner a competitor offers a higher rate. Right? So you have to have a higher portion to cater to the liquidity needs. So liquidity managers must set aside liquid funds according to some desired operational rule for each of the three kinds of funds. Maybe 95% of the hot money base has to be maintained as liquid funds. Right, so liquid funds in the form of treasury bills, interbank lending, or repo lending, meaning reverse repos. This is how you calculate the liquidity requirement. First, you need to calculate what is called a liability liquidity reserve. Right? So liability liquidity reserve is, if you assume that 95% of hot money is going to go out, you need to maintain 95% in a reserve. Okay, so it's 95% of your hot money base minus whatever reserve that you have already maintained. Now, for example, banks have 2% reserve now. So the hot money base minus 2% reserves into 95% has to be maintained for hot money. Then if you feel 30% of vulnerable funds will be withdrawn next period, the vulnerable fund base minus the 2% reserve into 30%, and 15% of stable funds will be withdrawn. It's stable fund base minus 2%, minus the legal reserve of 2% into 15%. Banks must have liquid funds to make good loans. Customer relationship is important. Management should meet all good loans in order to build a lasting relationship that will generate deposits in the future and earn fee income by providing other services. Right. So customers will ask for loans from time to time. If a customer asks for a loan and you say you don't have money to give, you are not going to give it, then that will not be, that won't go down very well with the customer. Right. So if a customer comes and asks for a loan, you have to cater to that need. It's a must. If you turn down the customer, he will not come back. He'll go to a competitor. Maybe if he goes to a competitor once, he might be loyal now, but tomorrow he might not be loyal. Yeah. So the total liquidity requirement is your liability liquid reserve, the reserve that you have for your deposits going out plus whatever the loans that might go out, potential loans outstanding minus actual loans outstanding. How much of loans will you be granting the next period minus current base, right? That is also need to be looked at. You need to look at the liability side as well as the asset side. The success depends on the manager's judgment, experience, and attitude towards risk. Banks must define the best and worst possible liquidity positions the bank might find itself in and assign probabilities to as many of these situations as possible. Right, so let's try this example. Yes, Dham, you're right. The 5th month is sorry, the sources and uses of funds. The calculation is wrong. It has to be actually 4 minus 12 is plus 16. You're positive here. So these are the two bad months. You have two bad months, the 3rd and the 6th. You're right. Okay, sorry about that. Right, so let's get back to this question. So let's try this question. ABC Bank estimates the following. Hot money is 2,500. 95% needs to be kept as a reserve, as a liability liquid reserve. Vulnerable funds 2,400, 30% reserve. Stable funds of 10,000, 15% reserve. The bank always keeps 3% legal reserve. ABC Bank's loans total 135,000, but recently have been as high as 140,000. The trend growth rate of 10% a year. You have to calculate total liquidity requirement, right? So your liability liquidity reserve plus potential loans minus actual loans outstanding. Liability liquidity reserve. Okay, so hot money basis 2,500. You expect 95% to go out, which means 95% needs to be maintained in a reserve, 2,500, but you're maintaining legal reserves of 3%. So 2,500 into 3%. That is for hot money. Plus stable funds, 30%. $2,400 minus 2,400 into 3%.
Sir.
Vulnerable funds. And stable funds, you expect 15% to go out.
Sir, the whiteboard is not clear.
And you have a base of 10,000 minus 10,000 into 3%. Right. So a liability liquid reserve will be 4,457.15, right? That's your liability liquid reserve. And potential loans outstanding. Potential loans, ABC Bank's loan growth is 135, total loans is 135,000, but recently has been as high as 140,000. Right? So potentially you can be 140,000, the trend growth rate of 10%, right? So 140,000 highest, potentially it can increase another 10%, meaning it can go up to 154,000. So it's 140,000 into 10% minus actual loans outstanding of 135,000. Right, so that is 154,000 minus 135,000. Okay, so take anything out. I'm better than Actual loans 135,000. Right, so it's 154,000 minus 135,000 is 19,000. Plus 19,000. So your total liquidity requirement is the total of these two, which comes to 23,457.15 million. This is going to be a total liquidity requirement for the next period. Right, so let's move on to the next one. A similar question. Excuse me. ABC Banks estimates hot money of 19,000 and keeps 80% reserve. They expect 80% of hot money to go out. Whatever funds 54,000 and they expect 25% to go out. That's why they need a 25% reserve. Stable funds 112,000. They need to keep a 5% reserve. The bank always keeps 3% as legal reserves. And so 3% is kept as legal reserves. Total loans is 117,000, but recently have been as high as 132 million, 132,000. Trend growth rate of 8% a year. Right? So it's identical question. My request is you all should try this question. Right? Do it at home so that you can revise what we did in class. Right? So your liability liquidity reserve, you can have a worst possible liquidity position. That means deposit growth will fall below management expectation. Right? Your deposit growth will not be as high as you expect. Loan demand will increase above your expectations. So if your deposits don't grow as much as you expect, the deposit growth will be low. If loans grow more than what you expect, there'll be more cash going out. Right? Then you face the maximum pressure on available liquid funds. If that is the case, you're short of liquidity. You're going to be severely short of liquidity. Then the bank faces a sizable liquidity deficit. Deficit is going to be huge. So you need to develop plans to raise liquid funds. This is where you need to plan, right? Remember the previous example, what we did, you end up with surplus or a deficit. Then what do? Likewise, the best possible liquidity position is where deposit growth increases above your expectations. Demand falls below expectations. Demand for loans is below expectations. Then you're left with a surplus. This is when the bank faces the minimum pressure on available liquid funds. The bank faces sizable liquidity surplus. You need to develop plans to invest the surplus. Right now, for example, if you look at this, the best possible liquidity position is 170,000. Average loan forecast 110,000. Probability assigned by management is 15%. Okay, so there's a 15% chance that your net liquidity position will be 60,000. Highest possible liquidity, then the highest possible probability of occurrence is 60% chance of net liquidity position being 10,000. Right? That's 150,000 minus loan forecast of 140,000. Then there's a 25% chance of you ending up with negative liquidity. Your deposits fall short and your loans go up. Right? So you're negative 20,000 with a 25% probability. So if that is the case, then what is your liquidity position? Your net liquidity position. and probability. %15 chance that your net liquidity position will be 170,000 minus 110,000, 60,000. 60% chance that it will be 10,000. 10,000, there is a 60% chance, right? 10,000 is 150,000 minus 140,000. And 25% chance that it will be a negative of 20,000. So your average liquidity position will be 60,000 into 15% plus 10,000 into 60% minus 20,000 into 25%. So this is 9,000 plus 6,000 minus 5,000. Which is 10,000. Your average liquidity position will be 10,000. So this is called the structure of funds approach. It's the most likely outcome lies between these two extremes. Many banks calculate expected liquidity requirement as, right, so it's a probability based estimate based on probabilities. Then the liquidity indicator approach. This is where you use ratios, estimating liquidity requirement based on experience and industry averages. So you can look at your cash position, right, which is cash and deposits due from depository institutions divided by total assets. Higher the cash positions, the better. Liquid securities, government securities divided by total assets, higher the liquid ratio, the better. You don't have to memorize these ratios, right? So you need to look at various indicators to see where your liquidity position is. So if the liquidity position is, the indicator is high, that means you're in a better off wicket than it being low. Right? You don't have to memorize the ratios. Well, if you all want, you can use some of these figures and calculate the ratios, right? But it's not necessary. Now, this is how central bank calculates liquidity. Every licensed commercial bank with effect from 1st April 1989 maintains liquid assets of not less than 20% of total liabilities. Okay, so 20% liquid asset ratio. And if you're short, the second point is penalty rate is 0.1% per day. So annually, it's 36.5%. The central bank liquidity calculation, based on this, your liquid asset ratio should be more than 20%. You don't have to memorize, but you should know that there is such a ratio and you can't fall short, right? So it includes cash balances with commercial banks, money at call, treasury bills, bonds, import bills, all that, right? So remember, repos will have a negative impact on your liquid asset ratio. Whenever you borrow repos, your liquid asset ratio will go down. Signals from marketplace that a bank is short of liquidity. Public confidence in the bank will reduce. People will lose confidence in the bank. The stock price will also reflect the bank's liquidity situation. If the bank is short of liquidity, stock price might come down. Risk premiums or FD rates that the bank offer will increase. They might be forced to sell some of the assets and they might sell it at a loss. Creditors, they might not be able to meet commitments. They might start borrowing excessively from central bank. Factors in choosing among different sources of reserves. When you look at what are the factors, now, for example, in your own case, personal case, if you want to borrow Take a housing loan. What are the factors you need to look at? You need to look at the term. Right? What is the purpose of the loan? The term period, the time period, the reliability of the source. Then the KYC, even that, right? You can't borrow from each and every source now. The relationship, right? Regulations. What is the collateral requirement? Can you borrow on a clean basis? All this needs to be looked at. Accessibility, documentation, legal factors. You need to look at all of those things. Okay. Yes. So that is the session for today. Thank you very much. I will meet you all next week. Stay safe and have a great week. Thank you.